Welcome to Playing with Fire, the podcast for people who are ready to custom build their love.
We're talking about non-monogamy, however you design it, as an individuation opportunity.
Want to leave the default and make your life spectacularly you? You're in the right place.
Hi.
Hey there.
Today I want to talk about differentiation.
Well, great, because I talk about differentiation. I feel like all day, every day. So
Well,
good for both of us to talk about it.
It's a good thing to talk about. The concept is relatively new to me. Like, I'm very old, so it's years old, but I'd like to get into what it's for, what it means, what we're going for. And as ever, let's define our terms. Let's talk about what we're talking about.
Oh, okay. Let's start in my favorite spot.
Right?
Sure.
So differentiation. Let's start there.
Well, differentiation is a word, first off, that a lot of people may have heard already if you've been exploring your own psychology, if you've been exploring non-monogamy, you may have already come across this, you may have heard it in couples counseling. I like to think about differentiation really from a place of what does it look like? What can I do if I'm differentiated? Because, it's right in the word there. We can hear that differentiation is the separation of two things. Like we can hear that there's the ability to notice the difference between two beings.
And you're looking for the practical.
I want to be practical about it.
Sure.
Right? So I can give a short definition. Differentiation is the ability to maintain a solid sense of self as distinct as an individual, but without walling off from intimacy, right? So I have to hold this tension of, I want to know who I am, and I don't want to wall myself off in order to do that. And that's why it's so tricky. A well-differentiated individual is able to identify their emotions, thoughts, needs, wants, feelings, all that stuff from their partners and their friends and their parents. Like you can tell the difference and identify those. And then you can hold steady and share that information about yourself in the face of discomfort. And you can receive another person sharing their authentic self in the face of your own discomfort. And that little practical definition of like, here's differentiation in action, that comes out of David Schnark's work. David Schnark is a really remarkable counselor who wrote about all kinds of books about sex, sexuality, relationships, and he'd done amazing work. I just want to say, though, it's also very mononormative, very heteronormative work. And I think all of those concepts apply really well to an expansive relationship system.
Okay. So practical differentiation. I like it. And my experience so far, you study this stuff at a deep level. And I experience living alongside of you, learning from you and learning some from the resources that you learn from, mostly just from you though. And here's
I give you a constant lab.
It is. Well, that's actually what I was going to say is if anybody's curious about my experience of the practicality of this, how many times have you said to me, would you come to me with a point of view, please?
Yeah.
How many times? And
today or
yeah, right. And
actually, because I can think of 2 times today that I've said something to that effect. Like, yes, can you please show up to our conversation or our actions with your own point of view?
And every time you do that, I'm reminded of, yeah, right. That's me not differentiating fully. Because when I heard you describe, right, knowing myself, knowing my emotions, my thoughts, my me, so that I can be stable, secure, like standing firm in amongst everything else that's happening. And when I don't do that, I don't have a clear point of view. Even if I have that, if I'm not presenting to other people that point of view, then really what's the difference? Practically speaking, I might feel differentiated, but I need to act it too. And that's where the
Yeah,
practicality comes
right.
from.
So an applied definition is
Hmm.
different
Yeah.
from a definition that we can use on paper. And
Right.
I do think that it's really important to name what differentiation is. We can get into the details of how does it look in action, and how does it feel to enact it. And I'd like to just name that it is an ongoing process.
Hmm.
I don't always feel well differentiated. I don't always feel the clarity of my own my emotions, my thoughts, my needs, and then share them fully with you. I want to. This isn't a place where I think we should always be aiming for perfection. Like I think that actually leads to overwhelm.
Yeah.
So instead, I just like to revisit it and think, wait,
Hmm.
am I enmeshing with you? Am I honestly, for me, if I'm not differentiated, if I'm that's a sign for me that I am feeling overwhelmed. I am feeling like I'm feeling lazy. Like I'm feeling like being lazy
Right.
in
Yeah.
the active sense of that word. Like I just don't want to. It will be easier if you make all the decisions and you voice all of your needs and wants, and I just go along. And that leads me to a place where that can work for a while. And then often I also am quietly building up resentment.
Yeah.
And I may
Sure.
even be keeping that a secret from myself that, like, oh, actually, I'm going along. I'm not actively voicing what I am, who I am, what I need, what I want. So, differentiation is a really important piece of having a mature relationship, whatever kind of relationship structure you want to have. And I think it's also important to define how differentiation as a term is different from individuation. This
Okay.
podcast is about,
Yeah.
it. Our premise is that we're talking about non-monogamy as one potential pathway to explore your individuation. Your individuation is an ongoing psychological process of becoming more and more yourself. So I like to think of these two, and I'm using the simplest Jungian definition of individuation, this ongoing process of becoming more and more yourself. I think of differentiation as the trailhead. That is the place from which you can do your individuation work. They're not synonymous because just because I'm differentiating doesn't mean I'm actually then applying my own my reflection time. It doesn't mean that I'm deepening my relationship to myself. So I think of differentiation as necessary, but will not produce the same results as someone who says, okay, I'm going to work on my differentiation because I know that that is healthy for me as an individual and for us as a relationship unit. And I'm going to take on the work of doing my individuation work, which also means getting into getting to relate my unconscious to my consciousness. So that's the work of individuation. It's bringing the unconscious and conscious into a dialectic, bringing them into conversation. And so I need to be differentiated because if I'm totally enmeshed with you,
Yeah.
or if I'm completely walled off from you and I can't even share myself, those things will get in the way of me practicing my own individuation work. And this is something that I think gets lost in translation because most people don't study like Jungian psychology that much, but we do use the word individuation. Like it gets it gets talked about on Instagram and stuff. So I like to tease them apart and remind myself that sometimes I'm more focused on my differentiation as a practical condition of my relation. Like this is the work I'm doing in my relationships. This is an ongoing practice that helps me be a better version of me and show up in my relationships. It also helps me get to know myself better. And from there, it will become easier to do this in-depth psychological work of bringing my unconscious material into conscious awareness, my individuation.
Okay. Awesome.
I know that so that's a little heady. The
No,
thing is, not
well,
everybody has to, you don't have to individuate.
you
You don't have
you
to do
don't
that
have to
work.
individuate. You don't have to know all the ins and outs and the Jungian framework that is built around this. But my experience has been that I'm really enjoying working on my differentiation as part of my individuation work. So we got differentiation, um, separating me from you, me knowing me as distinct from you.
Right. Which, by the way, I need to have relationships with others in order to practice in a very real way. In order to practice differentiation, there has to be an other. If I were to go live on a mountaintop alone, I'm not going to differentiate and I'm not going to individuate because I'm not actually practicing. Whew, there is a me here.
Right.
I am whatever this is. That's me, my soul, my incarnation, my whatever my particular inhabited meat suit is different from you and whatever it is that you are. And it is being in relationship that lets us feel that. And it's so powerful. And it's why, for me, the act of being in relationships, even though they get messy and difficult, they are the pathway to that depth psychologically oriented life that I want to live personally.
That has been my experience too. And it works in both directions. I need somebody all around to be able to tell where I end and somebody else begins. If there's nobody else around, I can take up all the space. It doesn't matter. There's no way to tell. And then on the other side, the more distinct I am from the people around me, the easier it is to see them. Because I'm not just seeing reflections of me, I'm seeing them.
Yeah.
Which is a great service to them, is my experience.
So a lot of us struggle with differentiation. And I know I struggled with it. And we had a recent episode about enmeshment and about what that looks like, what it feels like. And enmeshment, so if you already listened to that episode, enmeshment is a place from which we would want to work on differentiation. Like that's like diagnostically, like there's the
that's
pathway.
what you would work on if you wanted to be
But
less enmeshed.
I think it's worth summing up a few of the signs that you're ready to explore differentiation. Or it might be a good idea to think of this, to think about, okay, I'm going to start doing this as an active practice rather than just a pie in the sky ideal.
So back to the practical. Hooray.
Yeah.
Love that.
So first off, resentment. If there's growing resentment in you, even if you haven't voiced that resentment to your partners or your friends, if there's resentment, then again, just like I said earlier, you're probably going along with stuff that doesn't actually work for you. And that might be because you don't know what works for you. You don't, you either are uncomfortable getting to know or you just deny what you actually want. And that's across so many different domains. So if resentment is growing, check your resentment bank. If it's growing, I want you to think about taking your differentiation seriously. The other is if you're feeling smothered. So sometimes people will tell me how they feel engulfed or they feel smothered. They feel like someone is taking them over or trying to live inside their system, or like, they feel that. Like if you feel smothered, there is a chance that you have a partner who is actively like suppressing you, is actively trying to suppress you. It is also possible that you're volunteering for that, that you're feeling smothered. And this happens to me all the time. We talk quite a bit about how you have a tendency to enmesh.
Yes, I do.
I do too, but mine looks different because it often looks like all of a sudden I feel smothered. I feel like you're too all up in my stuff. But I didn't yesterday or the week before that or the week before that. And all of a sudden I get this sensation that I am being overwhelmed. So it comes on me very suddenly. And I point my finger out at you and I'm like, you're smothering me. Okay. Just like take that as data. The symptom is really helpful. I'm not actually trying to fix that symptom. I just want to use it as a way to notice like, oh, yeah, that's me not taking care of myself. And so I'm getting to the point of feeling smothered rather than sharing where my edges are, where are my boundaries, where are my limits. And of course, if you're over-functioning, under-functioning, I'm going to refer you back to the enmeshment episode because we go deep into over-functioning and under-functioning. And you might flip-flop those roles, right? You might also have hit emotional gridlock, like where it just feels like you're having the same discussions or the same fights over and over and over again. That can be because you've basically become like a little closed loop and you can't even really tell. You might even notice that you and your partner, you take up different sides of the argument. One time you're arguing for more freedom, one time you're arguing for less freedom, whatever the thing is, because you're inside a closed loop. But humans aren't really great at being inside terrariums other than our Terra Earth. So we have to just notice that if we're in emotional gridlock, it's a sign that, yeah, we might need to be able to break some patterns. But in order to break patterns, I have to know what my patterns are. There are other signs too, though. I mean, a reduced willingness or wantingness, not willingness, but a reduced wanting of intimacy. That could be emotional intimacy, sexual intimacy, intellectual intimacy, like just a desire, your desire sort of ebbs away. It could be that you are actually, that's the sign. Your psyche's telling you, hey, it's time to create that space. Esther Perel talks about it a lot, about that, creating that space so that there's oxygen for the desire to flame, right? We need that space. For other people, it's avoidance. Could be that you just start avoiding things, you start running away from them. And there's no, there's no right or wrong here. I'm trying to make a list of signs that differentiation might break up what's going on, like the current, whatever's happening for you. Because we can get really practical about it after
Yeah.
this. Get
Yeah.
really, really practical about what to do.
There's a lot to do there. And yeah, if I'm not very differentiated, if I'm in the times when I get more enmeshed, then the differentiation practices, they help break up those patterns.
Yeah.
Like even my experience has been that they don't have to come up out of me like, oh, it's time to do this thing. It's a kind of self-care to say, oh, actually, it would be good for me now to do something that shows and has me feel how distinct I am from you.
Yeah.
Even when I don't want to. Like, no, I really, what I want to like just cuddle in front of like, I don't know, a movie or something. And we'll just stay there and we won't think about much. Like you were saying about feeling overwhelmed and lazy. Well, maybe, I mean, sometimes that is absolutely the right thing to do,
Yeah.
but
Sometimes we want to rest.
absolutely we want to rest. And then sometimes personally, when I rest a lot, I just want to rest more. And so if my pattern is, wait a minute, that's been a lot. It's been a lot of that. Maybe it's time for something new.
Right. Is this a good time to use a piece of poetry?
Ooh, yeah, let's do it.
Because okay, one of my favorite lines of Rilke speaks directly to this point, I think. Rilke wrote, "Love does not initially mean merging into or surrendering to and becoming one with someone else. It is instead an ideal invitation for the individual to ripen, to become something of their own, to become a world unto oneself for the sake of another."
Okay, that's awesome.
Right. So
Wow.
that's in Letters to a Young Poet. And when I first saw that, I think you and I had been romantically engaging for maybe 2 weeks.
Mm.
And I remember this sensation of wanting to fall into you, like over and over. And I remember saying to you on the day that we exchanged our I love yous, I said I wanted to unzip you and climb inside.
Yeah.
And I came across that line of poetry not long after, and I will say I remember writing it in my journal, and I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. Like it stood out to me enough for me to write it down. And I didn't write tons of poetry down back then. But it stood out to me because it was so oppositional to everything I had felt about what it means to love. Love, especially the stuff that we call being in love, had always seemed to mean, yeah, like this surrender into an abyss that is the us.
The
It is,
merging into.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it stood out to me. And at the same time, you were seeing me in a very different light from what I had been. You were reflecting to me a very different version of myself than I had reflected before. And one of the things you said about me was that um, I had all of this intensity for life. And I was like, Yeah, I mean, I felt that. I'm like, yep, that strikes true. I have been described as a spitfire hundreds of times in my life. I have a huge intensity, and I have frequently felt like the act of loving, of falling for someone in some ways was to quell that fire. Like, yeah, I
Hmm.
would quiet it by merging with someone. And so differentiation as a concept, when I came across it as like a psychological ideal, like, okay, I want to do this because this is a thing to put into healthy relationships, it was scary as hell because I was afraid I would lose that sense of quietness that I got from combining with people,
I
loving
see.
people who could quiet some of that fire, who could, um, I didn't recognize at the time that I was going to need to learn how to become my own fire manager.
That's what I was thinking, and I didn't want to put words in your mouth, but it
Fire
sounds like you
I'm
were
gonna change
saying
the word, fire tender.
that's exactly the
Yeah,
phrase I was going to use, that you would, instead of quieting your fire in another, you started to see about tending your fire.
and that can mean at times, in fact, I just did it earlier this week. I was like, "I need a day where I do nothing, even though it's gonna make me really uncomfortable, 'cause I'm feeling that sense of, um, push, to merge with you so that
Mhm.
I don't have to tend myself."
Right. Oh, boy, do I get that. Um, and so what I hear in what you're describing is that the the act of differentiation, it's not just wandering around doing what you want. Like, it's not that. Like, it kind of sounds
No.
like, oh, it might be like, okay, I'm going to like try to manifest the most me that I can, keep
Yeah.
it separate from other people and figure out what I want and do those things. It's not just walking around doing all the things you want to do.
No, that's individualism.
That's
And I
individualism.
don't
Yep.
recommend that as like a primary mode of being,
It's
although in America, we're really good at practicing it,
I
as a
consider it
whole.
an antisocial way of approaching
It
relationships.
can be. It's also a protective mechanism,
Um,
like, right?
I mean, sometimes antisocial is important if your society is something that you aren't safely and in a healthy way in
Right.
relation with.
And that's your micro
So
society and your
you,
macro
yep,
society. So I
whatever
don't
that
want to
group
fault
is.
someone who is practicing a hyper individualistic coping strategy. And it's just not the same thing as being well differentiated. Being well differentiated again. So just reminder, being able to identify your own thoughts, emotions, needs, wants, likes, as distinct from your partners
And
and your
yep,
friendships. Be clear, like, this is not just, or if you're,
partners, friendships, parents, children.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then to be able to hold steady in your heart and your soul and your body and share that self with another, even though it feels wobbly to do so. Um, I want to acknowledge that it takes a level of trust to do that, and building that trust. It doesn't just happen overnight, but this is a reciprocal situation. We also build that trust by
Hmm. Hmm.
practicing doing this.
Yeah.
So I have done this. I have practiced being a well differentiated individual and gotten hurt because
And
the person I was sharing with was not actually able to hold me with care. And so this is tender work. I don't want to just say like, oh, it's just easy. It's not easy. Um, David Schnark talks about the 4 points of balance, and these have to do with differentiation too. He says there's developing a solid, flexible self, having a quiet mind and a calm heart, engaging in grounded responding, and maintaining meaningful endurance, like having a broader perspective while you're taking in your partner's information and sharing your information. It's not an easy get. And then we have to talk about the practical piece. We also have to nurture some level of separate hobbies, relationships, responsibilities. If we cultivate our differentiation through some individual moves, it can be, then we have something to share. If we don't cultivate that, I mean, how many times during the pandemic did I say, "Oh my gosh, if you aren't able to get out again, like
Yeah.
I felt you encroaching on my space constantly. And it wasn't physical space. We had physical space. We were very blessed and lucky to have lots of
No, but
physical
it was
space.
the way that I came to you looking for energy. I mean, to put it simply, but um, it came to a point where you could very clearly say to me, "Would you please bring something to this relationship?" Because instead of doing that, I was looking to you to bring it to me.
Yeah.
Now, that's a dance that we do in relation with other people. It's not specific to monogamy. It's a relational thing that we do. Like, okay, I experience you in a particular way, and I'm trying to be a particular experience for you. And your experience of me was very flat because I wasn't doing the kind of work, the practical practices that allowed me to be connected to myself enough to bring anything out.
Yeah.
And the result was, yeah, that feeling of encroachment. Okay, here you are again. Okay, maybe back off, or maybe go away and find something that you can bring back.
Right. And
And that was hard
and this is
for,
a
but
place where practicing non-monogamy, like I think people try to insert extra more partners as the tool.
oh yeah,
But you took all of last year off from dating.
hmm
And that did that hinder your differentiation capacity in any way?
no,
Because it's not about
no,
that.
that's
Like,
no, not at all.
so
I was
sometimes people like conflate these
okay. Yeah, no,
ideas.
that I mean, honestly, I took the year off to focus on my differentiation. What I said, I realize now, because what I said was, I want to spend the year dating myself instead of dating other people.
Yeah.
That's differentiation. Hey, what's going on in here? What have I got? What do I like? Let me take myself out or in and see what I find, see what I learn, see
Yeah.
what there is to talk about.
Yeah.
So it's that internal connection.
I think that's really, really important. I think just noticing the difference between hoping that having more partners will automatically help me differentiate versus being intentional about this. I believe that differentiation is it's a practice. And it really does start with just practically speaking, identifying your wants, your needs, your likes on an ongoing basis. Like seeing that as a normal thing to be revisiting over and over again, which means we need to experiment because you're growing and changing. So you have a great example in your life. So I watched you over the last year plus experimenting with putting martial arts back into your life.
Hmm.
You're black belt in judo, and you were like, okay. I mean, for years you talked about it, but just didn't get back. And then I watched you experiment by trying out some forms that were convenient. They were around. They were nearby.
Yeah.
And I watched you like trying them out in earnest and then finally going back to judo and finding, oh, there's me. Like immediately, like you came
It
back from
was.
your first
You're
practice
totally right.
and I was like, oh, there he is.
Yep.
There's Dragon. I see him. Because it works for you. And so I saw you do the thing where you intentionally explored the other martial arts that were nearer and closer and easier for you to access. And they didn't give you access to that part of you.
Right.
It just
Yep.
didn't do the
That was
thing.
not a route in for me.
And I
Hmm.
thought that was really interesting because they were more convenient. So it seemed like they would have helped you nurture that part of you that you wanted to wake back up.
Yeah. That's what I
But
was hoping for. It's like, okay, well, it doesn't have to be judo. It could be other things. I'll go try some stuff.
and
Turned out, nope, the judo is enough a part of me that I needed that
so
particular thing.
right
And
back
I didn't
to
know that.
you had to identify your actual likes.
Yeah.
Like what do you like? And you could describe to someone what you like about judo and why, but it doesn't really
No, it
matter.
doesn't matter because
What matters is that you like it.
yeah, I could describe it and all they would get is information about why I like it. It's no information for anybody else. You like what you like. This is what I like.
But I love having you come home from that and then sharing what you like about it. And I
Mm.
often don't understand. I like it takes a lot. There's quite a lot of sharing that will happen because I don't get it. I don't have a visceral sense of why this is any different from that. And I've seen the practices and I'm like, honestly, I don't get it. I don't know. They're all pretty. I like people doing these activities, but because none of them gives me that enlivened sense,
Yep.
it doesn't. I get a chance to actually listen to you and know you better, and I'm grateful that you took the time to experiment, but it was really good for me to remember that just having separate things to do isn't the same thing as actually identifying what do I
Yep.
like, what do I want,
Right.
what works for me. And so I would encourage everyone to take an experimental view of differentiation and see how your changing self, just because you do separate things from your partners doesn't necessarily mean that you are keeping up with yourself. Like you could still
Yeah.
lose track of
Right.
who you are,
Hmm.
because we get into patterns and we're just trying to make life work.
Yeah, because
So
I'm not defined by being not you. So just going and doing things that you don't do, that that's not that's not it.
right. So we can practice our differentiation, and everybody can do this by, yeah, dating yourself a little bit. I mean, if
Hmm.
you don't like that phrase, you don't have to use it. It's fine. But expand your imagination about what it is that you would like to do. If there's some thing that you have hoped that a friend or a partner or somebody would do, plan it, do it on your own. If there's something
Hmm.
that you've wanted to watch, but it's like you think that the other people in your shared space wouldn't want to watch it, like set the time aside and actually do it. Um, or get sexy, like masturbate, read erotica, like check out the content and the toys that you want to play with. Like there are a million ways that you can spend time with yourself and reacquaint yourself with yourself. Um, and it is hard to do that when we're already struggling to find time to do all the things, but it's practically speaking, if we don't make time for that, it's going to be hard to know whether we're actually identifying our needs, wants, likes, all that stuff, or whether we are accepting what is already in our imagination, like
Hmm.
what's
Yeah.
there. We're like, here's what I see available to me. I'll just do that. So I want to invite everyone to practice that. Practice some radical discontinuity with your daily habits and just mix things up, to see what happens. And of course, we could take this into a more relational space and say, if what I'm aiming for is differentiation so that I can share something with the people I already care about, well, I can also do that by making space for us to get really curious with each other.
Okay. Yeah.
We
Right.
could make some space to set down the idea that we know who each other
I see.
is.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah, and
have
we can engage with each other um with loosely, like, okay, show me who you are today, and dig into some of the, like, I could ask you some specific questions that I have, specifically the ones that I think I might already know the answers to.
That's it. Yeah. So the curiosity date, which is one of the it's a PDF that you can download on my website. If you're on my mailing list, you've probably already gotten it. But it's a bunch of questions designed specifically to be asked after you've set down the idea that you already know the answer. And that's not that easy to do, but it does make space for your partner to share a fresh view of themselves to you. You could also you could explore new central practices. You could explore yes, no, maybe lists or a question asking game. There are tons of great question games out there, the answers decks and
Yeah, there's
or tell
decks
us and all
and
that. You could also play the 3 minute game. That's a great one. We can make sure the link for that
yep.
is in the show notes. The 3 minute game, which I learned from a Betty Martin training. Um, Fantastic. It is a sensual opportunity, but it does not in any way need to be sexual. I've played the 3 minute game with friends. It can be incredibly opening. It can open up space for, oh, what does this person actually want, and can they set their actual limits? It's a beautiful opportunity for this. As we wrap up, maybe it's worth pointing out too that differentiation isn't, we don't get done with it.
Yeah, definitely.
But there's an opportunity for all of us to continually differentiate. But I find that there is a particular kind of person who struggles with this, and they show up in my practice all the time. And often they describe themselves as someone who's really good at being a chameleon. They curate themselves. They're really good. They might already have caught on to the phrase people pleasing, or they might not. There's somebody who identifies with the idea that they make other people comfortable.
Hmm.
Like that's what they're good at. And
I've met people like that.
when
So have you, me.
I have loved many people like that. And I'm not great at it. I'm not awesome. I can do it in public, but in close relationships, I find it very
It's not your
uncomfortable.
go-to, and it's
It's
because
not.
it's uncomfortable.
That is a particular strategy, though, that when people have it, um, because they apply it across many relationships, they may struggle with that first premise, that in that list of 4 points of balance,
Hmm.
the solid, flexible sense of self. So not rigid. We want to know, this is a strong, solid ego that is not dominating my whole personhood, right? Like I want to know who I am and be able to adapt. And I want to know when to be able to use that chameleon quality, because it is a miracle when you need it. That is
Yeah.
nothing short of a miracle. But when we use it everywhere, it may be incredibly difficult to even know. And I find people sometimes will struggle in work for months, thinking that they're practicing differentiation when they still have neglected to feel like it's okay to want what they want and like what they like,
Hmm.
and that
Yeah.
I don't like it is that, like, that's it. That's a complete sentence. I don't like it. No justification needed. Um, so differentiation practices, the actual ongoing practice of it, can be as simple as, you did this for quite some time. We practiced this for a couple of years, and honestly, I think we could do it again. Is you share with me first what
Yes.
you want.
Yep.
So if
Before
we're
I
going to go out
ask
to
you.
eat or
Hmm.
whatever, like share with me what you actually want, and
Yeah.
then ask me, because
That is such a helpful practice for somebody who struggles to figure out what they actually want and is trying to just meld into what the people around them want.
yeah.
So yeah, when I would do that, it was very uncomfortable at first, because what if I said something you didn't like and then you did it anyway, and then you didn't like the thing, and then it's my fault because I picked it, which of course, if I walk myself all the way through that, it's not my fault. If you don't want something, you get to say what you want too. And so, yeah,
Right.
but that's not how I was thinking. So anyway,
And this
yes, great exercise.
this leads into a beautiful conversation we could have about the difference between soft and hard limits.
Hmm.
If you say you want sushi and I say, okay, sushi's not my favorite, but if I say, like, no, that's a hard line, because I can't tolerate being around raw fish. It just really, really freaks me out. Like, those are 2 different things. We get
Yep.
to have hard lines, and then we get to share them. And so I get to practice my differentiation. And then we get to really be in the space of intra connection. Dan Siegel's word for when I have a solid sense of me, and I understand that we are operating as a system right now. We're operating as a togetherness, and both of those things being true is that space of intra connection. And so the intra helps us remember that the I exists even while the we exists. And we don't subjugate the I or the we to each other, which means we have to dance. Like,
Yeah.
we're going to be
Hmm.
dancing. We're going to be in the work of figuring out, what does that mean? Does that mean we trade off having our needs met? Yeah, it might. Does that mean that we sacrifice, or we just don't get what we want? Ideally, no. Instead, we're going to be in the process of figuring out what it means to collaborate on a life where, on the
Yeah.
whole, we're all getting more of what we want than what we don't want. And sometimes we are exploring areas of things that we don't think we want, and we get surprised and we find out, hey, actually, that's kind of cool. So, differentiation, it's a practice. It's not a thing to achieve. We're not going to get to a spot and say, I'm differentiated. done. It's an ongoing practice. Embrace it. It's a beautiful part of having an ongoing relationship and your relationship structure. Like just being polyamorous does not take the place of doing
No.
the work
Yeah.
of in an ongoing way, making sure that you're tending to your own differentiation.
Oh,
Thanks, Ken.
thank you.
There's no one right way to design your relationship. And lots of people, actually about 25%, according to a recent national survey, are interested in some type of open relationship. But how do you know if you are ready to open up happily? Not everyone is, and that's no problem. I've got a 60-second quiz that will give you the answer. And even better, you'll walk away with your next step, whether you're good to go or not so much when it comes to opening up. And this is no BuzzFeed nonsense. I personally designed this quiz from my years of academic research. Go to joliequiz.com. That's JOLIQUIZ.com. And find out if you're ready to open up happily and what to do if you are or if you're not.